Welcome to Sustainability Now, an exploration of technologies and paradigms to shape a world that works. Designed for socially conscious entrepreneurs and individuals interested in responsible stewardship of the planet. Sustainability Now covers food, energy, housing, water, waste, health, economics, and consciousness. Welcome to your community, Sustainability Now, with your host, Mira Rubin.
Welcome, everybody, to Sustainability Now, technologies and paradigms to shape a world that works. I'm your host, Mira Rubin, and I am delighted to introduce you to visionary filmmaker Michael Henning, who was recently christened the Great Educator by the legendary activist and consumer advocate Ralph Nader. A passionate advocate for hemp and hydrogen as sustainable solutions to climate change, Michael is making and shaping history. His first film, Hempsters, Plant the Seed, was instrumental in bringing about one of the most significant advancements in American agriculture since the end of World War II, allowing American farmers to legally grow industrial hemp in all 50 states. Michael's now working on two films, a Hempsters sequel entitled Hempsters Reap the Harvest and H2 Keys to the Cage, which spotlights the largest technology transition in the history of mankind, migration to a hydrogen economy. Michael, welcome. It is so good to have you here with us.
Every time it's fun. I love your show.
Thank you so much. So you really are a world shaper and a world changer. And what a thing to be able to say.
What a nice thing to say. And it just kind of, the Nader thing was kind of funny because he introduced me on his show as the great educator. He could have said a great educator or one of, and I said, now, Ralph, that's all I need. I can hit the college lecture circuit now with a title like that.
Well, it would be wonderful if you hit the college lecture circuit because you are really on the forefront of some of the major issues in our world, not just our nation, but in our world. And with Hempsters, Plant the Seed, that was what, in 2010?
Well, that's when it was released, but we started in 97 because
wow.
The news was out that Woody Harrelson had planted 4 feral hemp seeds in Beattyville, Kentucky, on purpose to be arrested to bring the issue of hemp versus marijuana and the difference to the courts. But I just kind of heard that through the grapevine. I didn't know exactly what had happened there. And then when I was told exactly what he did, I became interested. And the agent that I was working with at the time said, I think this is real. You ought to go for it. And he said he'd fly me out. So we jumped on the plane. We missed the connecting flight. And I said, Woody's not going to wait for us for 4 hours. We got there 4 hours later and he was there. So this is his cause and something he's devoted a lot of time to. The only thing I think that caught him by surprise, when it came time for the actual court hearing, he never thought about the fact that he could lose and go to jail. That really, that bothered him a lot more than I think he expected. He came out after the hearing and was kind of choked up.
Wow. So there's the movie itself really chronicles the fight to legalize hemp, right? And some of the propaganda that had been promoted and the struggles really and the history of it. I think a lot of people don't really know what the history is in this country. Maybe you could just talk about that a little bit.
Two things before we move beyond the trial and get back to it, but I think it's really important to know that what Woody did took a lot of courage because of the fact that he could have been incarcerated. On film, he says it's hard work breaking the law. So he admits he knew he was breaking the law. That was a big point. And then they filmed him breaking the law. So he was guilty on all. It's a slam dunk, you would think. But the jury did something that's very interesting that very few people know about. And I don't know if they knew about it, or if they stumbled onto it, but everyone should know that there's this process that takes place in the court called jury nullification. If you ever want to get out of being on a jury, all you have to do is ask the question, what's jury nullification? They'll send you home. They don't want it talked about in the courtroom. They don't want it talked about in the courthouse. Any conversation about jury nullification is cut off. And I know a friend who asked that question. He was in the room with like 70 people. They sent the whole group back. Everybody got to go home because jury nullification is where the people, the judge will say, you have the right to, you're here for one reason, either guilty or not guilty. That's all you're here for. Well, that's not true. There's another reason. If the people feel that a law is not correct, if the law is incorrect, that 12 can say not guilty and nullify and acquit the participant who's being charged. And that builds case law. If you do it enough, if all the people who ever got in a drug case, for example, said not guilty, eventually they would decriminalize all drugs because case law would build that point. And so we, the people, is a real hard thing to attain. But when you're ever in a jury, at that moment, you have a real powerful ability to change things. And that's what they did. They could tell he was guilty technically of the crime, but his intent was to bring this issue of marijuana and hemp to the forefront and have it discussed and prove that there's a difference, which he did. So that's important for the first start there. And then the second part of your question was about.
Well, wait a second. Now you sort of opened up a big can of worms, and I think we'd like to talk to it a bit.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about is a really interesting vehicle for us as the public to challenge unjust laws.
Yeah, and it can happen so fast if we, the people, had a consensus of something that we felt was unjust. Me personally, I think that the data is way in the favor of the countries that have decriminalized all drugs. They take the money that they would use.
Well, I don't want to take this into conversation
okay.
about legalities.
Well, that's the thing. Any law.
What we're talking about is the fight to legalize hemp.
Right. It's kind of intertwined, but they classify hemp as a drug. It's not.
Well, okay, exactly. So that's really the point, is that they classify hemp as a drug and it isn't. And there was a conflation of issues around hemp and marijuana. And marijuana is considered a drug, and hemp was being classed as a drug, but it's not even psychoactive, right? You
couldn't smoke enough of it to get high. I've heard different analogies, like a joint the size of a telephone pole, but you could never get high on it. There's the amount of THC. It's like saying there's arsenic in apple seeds, but you don't hear about people dying from eating an apple seed. It's parts per millionth. Really, when you get down to it, you have to you have to deduce that there must have been a hidden agenda. There must have been another. Why? Back in 1937.
Let's step back. Speaking of hidden agenda, let's sort of step back into the history of hemp a bit, and to realize that it was a part of the victory campaign during the Second World War. Yeah. Not only was it legal, but it was mandated, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they allowed any families that had a son that was helping his father farm could stay home and not go to war. So they were rejuvenating the history that was already in states like Kentucky. It was easy for them to start growing hemp again because they came from generations that did that. And the deal was, if you could do that, then we'll let your son stay home and not be drafted. So
when was hemp first made illegal?
1937. The thing is that we didn't have the ability to. You almost would have to have a time machine to go back and figure out what exactly happened. But they passed. It was called the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937. So they created this tremendous tax that was put on it, and it made it null and void. So, but what I have trouble with is understanding how could the American farmers who were growing hemp all the way up to that time as a part of their rotation crop, I never have gotten an answer. Were they just told to stop and they all went, okay? They must have said, what do you mean stop? If you're a farmer and you're growing that all your life and it's one of your main crops, why would you? It seemed like there would have been some kind of kickback on them stopping that from happening. And I could, to this day, I can't find that in the history books. But Jack Hara is the guy who heard that modern times that there was a film made by the Department of Agriculture to promote industrial hemp growth by the American farmers during World War II, and it was like this film that we all heard about, but nobody saw it. And he found it in the Library of Congress. He finally found the film, and it's almost hokey. It says hemp for victory, hemp for rope, hemp for this, and it's all for the Navy, and it's just amazing that he found that, because it proves that there's something up here. Why was it that they did that to begin with? That it was illegal, and all of a sudden they needed it because the Japanese had the Philippines, and we were getting most of our hemp from Manila hemp at that time. So where are they going to get the rope and things for the Navy? So the American farmers had to grow it. But the fascinating thing is, as soon as the war was over, right at the downbeat, 1945, not only did they stop it again, like why? But then they took the seed stock, the American seed stock, and destroyed it. And the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937 was based on, the marijuana, even the word marijuana, we should never use it anymore, because that was a word they picked to stigmatize and to demonize the plant, and making it's all cannabis. That's what everybody should know. It's all cannabis, different strains, different types of growing for different purposes. But marijuana was this, this Hispanic, relation to that it was coming across the border, and jazz musicians, but they didn't have a marijuana problem in 1937 anywhere close to what would ask for a law to be passed. It was a strange timing also, because that was the year that they ended prohibition on alcohol. So they kind of come to the realization that prohibition doesn't work, and they did it the same year on marijuana.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It leads to you to want to know what was really going on. And I think you saw it in the film. We have that little clip from Family Man, and the dog Brian says it in such a succinct little moment that it was the powers that be that were being challenged by hemp. Hemp was great for paper, so the lumber industry didn't want the competition. We now found out that it can be used for oil, like in competition with the prices of gasoline and oil. It's amazing that you could do that, but there is evidence.
One of the most useful resources on the planet, one of the most versatile resources, right? I mean, food, fuel, housing.
Fiber, food, fuel, and medicine. Those four components are very rarely found in any plant. I think bamboo has that quality, but there's not many. And then they put this mandate out there called the Cannabis Federal Eradication Program, which, if you read it, they still have a page up on their website. You go to the Drug Enforcement Agency website, and there's a whole page for, it says the Cannabis Eradication Program. And it leads, when you read it, it sounds like they want to eradicate it, meaning just make it go out of existence, at least in the United States and then the world. So here they are trying to eradicate, as Willie Nelson, the man upstairs' greatest gift. That's one of the few plants that does all this. And they're trying to wipe it out. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Now it's been made legal in all 50 states. Donald Trump was actually the president who signed that dictate and allowed it to go out through the Farm Bureau. And all 50 states. Well, a friend of mine who has a history of being a cotton farmer here in Texas said that her family has the DEA still coming and chopping down the hemp in the area, that's wild feral hemp that's on the roadsides. And the people need to know that our tax dollars pays them $1.05 per plant they bring in. So I've done the math. When you grow it like for fiber, when the stalks are like bamboo, you can get 1 million plants in an acre. So these DEA agents are making $1 million per acre, and they're harvesting it. They're not eradicating anything. It's in the film. If you get a chance to watch Hempsters, anybody out there would see that they're chopping it down with weed eaters. So the roots are in the ground and the seeds fall. They grab it and they wrap it in bundles in 20, and they take that valuable crop and burn it. I mean, it's just an atrocity. I mean, I don't know. I just can't fathom how they think they're going to get away with still doing it now that the crop is legal. it's just.
So, Michael, tell us, you said you heard about this situation with Woody Harrelson planting the seeds and thought this is a great opportunity. How did you connect with Woody Harrelson?
Well, at the time,
and this is Woody Harrelson, the actor, and it was obviously a planned action where it was intentional to get arrested to be able to bring this to light. But please go on.
Yeah, some people want to get into activism, but they're afraid because they hear of the things that, like Woody is a true activist, and Julia Butterfly, people that go out on the limb, no pun intended, like Julia in the tree. And these are dedicated, really dedicated activists, and they work with groups like Earth First and those groups. And I had even heard of Woody being involved in the group that shut down the Golden Gate Bridge for some protest about something. That was a long time ago. So he's known for taking chances. And a dear friend of mine who I'd known for years, her name is Diana Oliver. She was getting into production, and she wanted me to direct it. She had seen some projects I'd done around the Dallas area. And to be honest with you, I turned her down 3 times. And it was on the 3rd time that my agent called and said, I think she's landed Woody Harrelson. I think you might want to consider taking this job. I'll pay your airfare. And I was, why not? So that's how I got that lined up. She had reached out to Joe Hickey. You know Joe.
I do. But why don't you tell folks who Joe Hickey is?
He's another great Kentuckian activist himself. He's been involved with hemp since day one. Him and a number of people, a lot of people made this happen. You know, thousands of people got behind the hemp movement. But for Joe to get out there and some of those great guys in Kentucky like Craig Lee and there's some Dave Spalding. There's a lot of people that should be acknowledged for doing this. But and Andy and Jake Graves, who were the farmers who were back in the World War II era, was growing hemp. Jake was his father. But Woody just went there and heard this, and he'd gotten in touch with Joe Hickey because Joe was out there on the internet promoting hemp.
So Woody actually pursued Joe?
Yeah.
And so for those of you who are watching, if you're not already aware, we also did an interview with Joe Hickey. We called it the Godfather of Hemp. And so you can find that on our website at sustainabilitynow.global or anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. So check that out also, especially if you're interested in hemp.
Another great American hero who's a leader of his generation who's passed away was Gatewood Galbraith. And Gatewood was such a powerful presence. Whenever you'd be around him, he just exuded this confidence that would want to make you follow him. And as I would listen to his lectures and things, and he'd come off the podium, I said, Gatewood, I don't know what it is you're saying, but whatever it is, that's me. What is that? He said, constitutional conservative. So he knew exactly what he was. And
he's also featured in the film.
Yeah, and people should look him up because he had a great website. I think those articles are still out there. Shadow of the Swastika, and just really, he was a deep guy. And one of the main things that he taught me is this, what we were just talking about, is he called it, he even gave college courses on it, and I filmed one of them. It was called the Synthetic Subversion. And the way he explained it to me is that back in the day, in the 30s and prior to that, even back to the founding of our country, the image that was being put out by the founding fathers was an agrarian society where you grew everything that you needed, you grew. And later we've come to find out that it included fuel of the future they didn't have back then. But so food, fiber, fuel, medicine, everything's in the rural areas to supply those areas with all their needs. It wasn't until DuPont and these pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate elite companies came back together and with a concerted effort, their pitch was everything was going to be made synthetic in the cities, in the closed areas that were inner cities where the factories were. And that way they could corral the people, and the rural areas were to be just minor of issue. So it was the course in history in the 30s, we were either this way or that way. And this way was natural, all organic, making our own fuel, food, fiber, medicine, or this way, which was all synthetic, which means the gathering of people together to work in factories. And it was a subversion, and it worked. But believe it or not, we're at that same juncture now. It's happening again. That's where your show fits in. We're at a decision point again. Do we want to go this way or that way? And in general, natural organic types of products, from the clothes you wear to the food you eat, is better in the outcome than when you take pharmaceuticals that have incredible, I mean, sometimes I've even heard ones where they say the antidepressant, and they say one of the side effects of this antidepressant may be suicidal thoughts. I mean,
Right.
what am I going to do? I'm already depressed. I take the medicine, now I'm going to kill myself. And I call the doctor and say it's not working. I
So
mean, it's funny.
let's get back to the movie and
Yeah.
and your first film, and like were you already on the hemp train when you heard about what Woody Harrelson did, or?
I was pro hemp, but I didn't really have any in-depth understanding of how valuable it'd be. I was a Whole Foods kind of guy, always feeling like if I ever moved to another city, I'd look for where the Whole Foods is, so I'd be close to that area. But if I were looking back, what's really strange is that since I was always going to those kind of health food stores, they didn't have not one single hemp product anywhere. And at the time, you couldn't even use the word hemp on the label. They had to fight through every step of the way. The lobby that did this is incredible. Vote hemp.
This was back in '97.
Yeah. Now you can't go to a store where it's just like walls of, every single aisle has something hemp on it. It's almost, it's amazing how much it's broken out now. It's gotten out.
It's taken a while.
It's taken a long while.
Yeah.
And back to the original point, why did they destroy the seed bank? That baffles me. I mean, the American farmers don't have that. They have to get them from Canada and start over. But why? I mean, destroy the seeds?
Well, it's interesting. Not only did they destroy the seeds, but they kind of destroyed history. Rewrote the books. Like, we don't know. It's not even that long ago, and we don't know what happened, which is really bizarre.
Yeah, and it's very, very difficult to even those that believe that it was a concerted effort done by these bankers, and it's a common thing mentioned in the film. It's just based on circumstantial evidence. Nobody has any rock solid proof that that's what happened. But it's kind of like process of elimination. It's all that's left. It's the only thing that could have happened.
So we're teasing people. We're teasing people with your film, and I'm wondering if there's a way to get a hold of it.
Yeah, Hempstersthemovie.com.
And the movie's available there?
Yeah, you can get it through Hempstersthemovie.com.
Okay, beautiful. We'll make sure to put that link on our website at sustainabilitynow.global, because if you haven't seen this film, you really need to see it. It is very illuminating, really eye-opening.
I did things on it that I didn't know I was doing. For example, there's no narrator. And my mentors and people that I look up to that are my guys that make films and documentaries said that that's like the coup de grace. I mean, that's the fait accompli. The one thing that they strive for is to make a documentary without a narration. The only other one I know of is the Rolling Stones by Martin Scorsese, the tour that they did. It's all years ago, but they assembled it recently. And I heard there's no narration. That I still haven't seen it, but that's what somebody told me.
So did you have experience making films before Hempsters?
Yeah, I was pretty dead set on that's what I wanted to do when I was accepted at UT Austin and was going to take communications there. And the year that I signed up, I was told I could get on a job with Ron Howard's first movie of the week. And there was an edit house in Dallas where he was doing the work.
Wow.
And I jumped right on it, and then I think that for people out there, I think it's important to do the college route if you can, because I got there, but I took the scenic route to get where I wanted to go. For example, I was told that you don't need to take these courses here. All they're going to do is teach you things about what is it called? Oh, I forget. Anyway, there was different courses that they had involved film theory. This woman told me once, and it's good to know those things. I figured it out by default, but don't pass that up if you have that opportunity. I wish I could roll back the clock and do that, but I ended up at the same place. I wanted to direct films, and so I went through the I worked in every department in filmmaking. I worked on every Oliver Stone movie that came through Texas. I was fortunate enough to be in with the A-team, and there was a union at the time that made it work that way. But when you're sitting right next to someone like Oliver Stone and watching him work, or Bruce Beresford or Mike Nichols or any of those kind of directors that I had the opportunity to watch, hands-on is a pretty good way to learn, you know.
For sure.
You're right next to him and see I can tell you some stories.
Well, you want to pick one?
But my favorite Oliver Stone story is he's one of those few directors that can make budgets like $80 million, which we were working on any given Sunday, and $80 million was the budget. And he would be down on the field working with these football players, and he didn't think about anything else. He just kept going and going. So the crew had been there, and the extras had been there from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Nobody had any meal break or anything, which didn't bother us. Crew members loved that because we just go get sandwiches at the craft service table. And it turns into double time, meal penalties, overtime, platinum time. I mean, it just starts to stack up. It's a tremendous amount of money. He was renting Texas Stadium, and we had to clear everything out that night for a concert to come in. It was just a huge undertaking, and he's not letting people have their break. And the investors are all up in the boxes and the suites looking down. And somehow or another word gets down, and I'm on the headphones because I'm in the sound department. I hear him saying that you got to tell Oliver Stone, we got to take a break. And the only person who can do that on a set is the first AD, first assistant director. And you could just see him just cringing over the fact that he's going to have to go up and he goes, and he had James Brown was on the ground, and he was correcting and telling James Brown what he wanted him to do, famous athlete who became an actor. And the first AD comes over and taps on his shoulder, and he looks at him like, what? And he goes, Mr. Stone, nobody has taken any breaks since 10 a.m. It's 10 p.m. The actors, the extras, the crew. And he goes, what? And he looks up at the suites and he goes, F the money. F the money. And you know what I'm trying to say. He just screamed, echoing, F the money. And he goes over and turns the craft service tables over, F the money. He got back and he started directing.
Wow.
It was terrifying. I mean, you wouldn't want to be in his crossfire. And he was a veteran from Vietnam. He was a serious guy. And so the wrap party was at the end of the week, and they sent us to this, guys, enjoy yourself. So I went, F the money. I walked up and said, I want your most expensive cognac. Well, that's $100 a shot. I said, I'll take 3 shots of Louis XVI and that $40 cigar. And they gave it to me.
Wow.
So I'm going to make a T-shirt, Oliver Stone, F the money.
That's beautiful. He would probably love that.
He remembers it.
Wow. It sounds very memorable. I don't know that that's something you forget.
He was so intense. He would take his script and he'd flip the script over, the one side and the back side is blank, and he'd be writing notes, and like if it said to laugh, he'd go, he would do things that the actors were supposed to do. He's a bad man, but it's a lot of fun to work with people like that.
Wow. So you have quite the history before you decided to just sort of step out on your own.
There was one prior to that that I did called Rockabilly Rebel. Elvis faked his death. It was living under the witness protection program in New York City as an Elvis impersonator to disguise himself. And I got together, when you're in that kind of work, and all your friends that you work with are grips, electricians, and truck drivers. I pulled together an entire movie set in the Deep Ellum area. I had 18 wheelers with equipment. I had entire crews. I had Panavision cameras. They said, here's a trick for filmmakers. They said, Michael, we'd love to loan you these cameras, but you don't have insurance. We do the loan. We know you. We'll help you out. So what you do is you go to a local production company that has annual insurance and just call it that. So I got with Gary Potts, a good filmmaker here. His company Potts Productions. So we called it a Potts Productions for the insurance, but then they gave me the film for free. I mean, they gave me the cameras, no charge, Panavision cameras. And that's when Diana Oliver, the producer on Hempsters, realized that I was able to pull these things together. She asked me to direct. But we pulled off a huge production with short ends. Another great thing. I don't know, now that we're digital, it probably won't matter. But back then when we were using 35 millimeter, if you're on a set, they always they reload the cameras before the film runs out. So the assistant camera operator goes, we're going to reload, and they stop. But those ends of the film that they would take off are called short ends, and they're ran for 2 or 3 minutes of film. So I went to all the guys that I knew and got all their short ends, I got 30,000 feet of footage. And
Wow.
watch when 2 minutes of rolling, it's a long time. You can do a scene. But I don't think people are even filming like that anymore, but it was a good trick. It worked.
That's genius, though.
Then we got it processed by, if you know how the laboratories work, at the end of the day, you know, that they're running this process through this chemical, they could easily tag on another so many thousand feet and just finish the run. So I got with them and asked them if they would, and they tagged it on and processed all my film for free.
Wow. Wow.
That's how it started. And then Phil Pfeiffer was
Great tips, low budget production. Wow.
Yeah, you can get all kinds of things done if you offer credits to companies. We had all our crew fed with restaurants that we said we'd put in the rolling credits, and Shiner Bach gave us kegs of beer, you know, we needed for a scene, as long as you promise them credit and show them that you're doing the film. Now that relates to Hempsters too, because when I was filming Hempsters, a lot of these people that are in the drug enforcement agency and those kind of groups, in a lot of ways, it's to their benefit just to ignore you, because your film's kind of empty if you don't have the counter position. And in order to do that, you have to make inroads and ask them if they'll be in your film. And what happened to me is they wanted a letter of endorsement. They wanted me to prove that I had a distribution company lined up. And I did have a distributor who was interested in the film. And they wrote me a letter that said that they were going to distribute the film. And when I gave that to them at the DEA's office, they allowed the interview. Bob Weiner, that was the guy's name, Bob Weiner, and he was great, because if I didn't have somebody who could counter the point that I was trying to make, it kind of seemed so one-sided. But he made sure that he showed up. I wanted to film. I love backdrops that are kind of majestic if you can pull it off. And he showed up. He's normally wore a coat and a tie, and knew that image was not cool. So he showed up in a leather jacket, you know, and just kind of played it down. And he was great. I couldn't thank him enough. There's one funny scene I got to tell you about real quick. He said, I said, well, Bob, tell me why you can't tell the difference between hemp and marijuana. I said, the Canadians do. He goes, well, you know, I'd have to see that. I'd have to hear that. I'd have to have proof, because our agents can't spot it from the air. I'd have to see that and have it proven to be. He goes, I know what you're going to do now. You're going to do a split screen and show exactly that, right? Well, I didn't think of that until he said it. And that's exactly what I did in the film. Gave me a great idea there. So thank you, Bob.
So you said you started in 97, it was released in 2010.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to have enough connections in the film industry where we had what we call work. Some festivals do what's called work in progress, which is kind of weird when you think about it. But when we won an award, best work in progress. So luckily the film finished and got distributed, and it proved that my good friend Michael Caine was right when he gave us that award. But Michael Caine now works for Earth Day Texas, doing Earth X films and things like that. But back then he was running the Developed Film Festival, and we got in as a work in progress. The way you qualify filmmakers is that you have to make sure that you have a questionnaire that you hand out, and about the film, and you're doing a test screening is what you're doing. And as long as it's a test screening, then you can do it as a work in progress. And we had that one, and then we got into the Maui Film Festival for the same purpose as a work in progress. But every time we would do a work in progress, my producer Diana would call it a premiere. She would love to just think that, well, here we go, and she put the word out that it was a premiere. And it took me a long time to battle IMDb enough to change it. And I finally got in touch with the guy who founded IMDb on his vacation. He just randomly picked up the phone and said, well, you could never pull this off. Who are you? And I told him what the issue was, because you don't want to say a release 2003 or 2004. It just makes it older and older and older. And if it wasn't a premiere, it wasn't. And I had to prove it, and I did. And so they made the real premiere was in Artifice Film Festival.
Why did it take so long?
Well, certain things in documentaries, you don't have a choice but to wait, like Woody's trial. Gotcha. He had a trial coming, but we didn't know when. We just had to wait until it happened 4 years later. And on the day of his trial, must be a coincidence. I can't imagine why they'd orchestrate it this way, but the Drug Enforcement Agency raided the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation on the day of Woody's trial. And I mean, they came in unannounced with weapons. Okay, now I thought, boy, if we could only caught that on film, And so I had a young friend of mine named Ira Flowers who was helping me edit, and didn't have enough footage to really do a lot of editing, and he was, waiting for something to happen. I said, Ira, why don't you go stay with Alex Whiteplume? I cleared this. Stay with Alex Whiteplume at the Indian Reservation and just wait there and live with them for a while, which I would have done if I were 22 at the time. And he jumped on it and said, okay. So we waited and waited and waited. He lived there for months, And then finally the day came where the DEA was this time there were more announced. And so we had a little heads up. We didn't know which day. And then here they came. And Ira was out there. He filmed it. He caught him coming in. And I didn't know this at the time, but we were really filming a real crime in progress, because the Drug Enforcement Agency doesn't have the right to do what's called treaty abrogation, where you are making decisions on whether a treaty is valid or not. And they even said that the Controlled Substance Act of 1973 trumps, that's the word they use, trumps the tribal sovereignty. Well, then I guess we can go into Canada then, right? I mean, they're right there.
Yeah, tribal sovereignty designates a separate country, essentially, correct?
Yeah, and they'll always say, the big thing to check on, what was that treaty ratified? In other words, to sign the treaty, then Congress has to approve it. Well, most of them were. I don't know of anyone that wasn't, but the Lakota's treaty with the United States government was ratified. That means it was passed, and that's a sovereign nation that has its own police force, its own school, its own language, everything. And then they just decided, we're going to come in there and chop your crop down because it's it's a controlled substance. And then I can't imagine where the money went, but the money goes somewhere.
Were there any political or legal ramifications or consequences for the DEA having done that?
Not then, but there might be now, because it wasn't clear to us that was a crime. I've been kind of trying to get this into Alex's head now. Winona LaDuke is a new contact for me. She was Ralph Nader's running partner in both his runs for election, and she's more political. I'm trying to get this information to them because we filmed it. So we have the crime. It filmed. Craig Lee is right when he says, the DEA ain't worth a damn. And Craig Lee said it. And he said, I cannot vote for them. I cannot put them out of office. And people who are put into office need to get rid of these. They're overstepping their bounds in policing another nation's choice. And I mean, the Native Americans I've met are some of the most gentle, kindest. You think there'd be more hostility on some level, but they're still just solid. They're there. They're determined to keep going. And this might be a real turning point for them, because if they can leverage their sovereignty and they don't have to wait for all these regulations, and the regulations are preposterous. I guess you know about that.
Well, so actually, let's segue from the first movie, Hempsters Plant the Seed, to Hempsters Reap the Harvest. And what is inspiring this new project for you?
Well, I didn't want to do a sequel. I just thought that just didn't fit. But when I heard that the DEA was still doing the federal eradication program on a crop that's legal, I couldn't believe it. And when I told Ralph Nader, he said the same thing. He said, wow, you got to come on my show and get the word out there that they're doing this, because they're just doing it. And there's nobody's even questioning it. They're just going around chopping it. Well, they're not eradicating the plant, for starters. And everybody knows that. And we're being taken for millions and millions of dollars by an enforcement agency that's already overstepping its bounds, and they're not eradicating it. So how stupid can we be if somebody who the Justice Department, I don't really know who checks into that. I think it's the Justice Department, needs to be made aware that, that's a lot of money for a complete, total ripoff. And when you think about it, I got to make this one point. This is so important. The way to grow hemp in America and most of the world it has to have a chemical test in the laboratory that your crop has 0.1% no more than 0.3, so 0.3 THC in it. So I say, imagine a wine that has 0.3 alcohol. It's not even wine. In marijuana, it's very similar that you don't really get it to a level where you get high off it until you hit like close to 10% and over. They could make it 5%. They shouldn't make it anything. But the fact that they're telling the American farmers that they have to have a crop that measures that way. I know here in Texas, they did the first year, and the crop measured 0.5, 0 THC, 0.5. Nobody would ever want to smoke it or touch it for a drug. And yet they told them no leniency at all. They said, nope, hot crop, you got to get rid of it. So they burned 180 acres and almost quit. Said, I don't know if we want to do this. They have millions of acres available, by the way, and literally millions. And they almost quit. They came back the next year and did a huge crop, and it worked. But they don't. There's no other crop that has those kind of stipulations on it. It's obviously a tactic to discourage the farmers from growing this venerable crop that there should be no regulations on it at all, in my opinion. But there you go. They're up to something.
So my understanding is partly due to your popularization of this issue and your film, and over the past number of years with the hundreds, thousands of other people that are active in forwarding legislation around hemp, that soon, I believe Mitch McConnell is going to sign into law a change of the parameter to 1%, correct?
I guess I don't believe in baby
Well, it's something, right?
It's going in the right direction. Here's what I propose. I hope some farmers hear this. They should put why should the Drug Enforcement Agency get paid for harvesting wild feral hemp? And if they grow a hot crop, of course you'd have to prove that they're not scheming or anything. But if they just grow their crop and it's hot, they should be allowed to do the DEA's job and harvest the crop, wrap it in bundles of 20, and they get paid the $1.05 per plant for all the effort they put in to grow the crop. Why is it that the DEA can do that and they get paid, but the farmer does it and he's got to burn his crop?
And the question is, who's paying the DEA's fee?
We are.
Taxpayer dollars, kind of crazy. But let's come back to this sequel and what.
Well, that's what inspired it. Yeah.
Is to expose what's happening with the DEA.
That was the main inspiration for it. I just thought that was good enough to really get some. I think I'll try to do it this time. But what I wished I would have done in the first film is to follow that truck to wherever they go. So I'm a private citizen. I'm just documenting what the process is. See who counts it, and then who is the check submitted to, and then who writes the check, and what does the check say on it, and who gets it, and who cashes it, because we're under a level of corruption here now that I think would shock people.
Well, maybe that's something to be including in the sequel.
That's what I'm thinking.
I know that Willie Nelson was in your first film and Farm Aid, and the movement really to bring attention to the plight of the farmers in this country and to raise funds for them. And as I understand it, you have an intention of having Farm Aid be part of this sequel as well. I'm wondering if you might talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, one of the things that we're trying to do is to make this. We're still in the no man's land. We don't, things go in another direction, and the farmers could come up with the consensus that it's just too difficult to grow this crop. So the victory's not yet. They did get it legalized, I call it decriminalized, to grow the crop, but it won't be a success until they can't get the genie back in the bottle. And we're close, but the farmers that are having these problems with growing a hot crop, as they call it, it needs to be avoided. And so Farm Aid is fantastic when you get to know those people. They really, really help the American farmers. And their goal is to maintain family farms, because if it all becomes corporate, if all the farms are corporate, then we're falling into that trap that Ralph Nader warns about so much. he has a great book out called Unstoppable that says if the right and the left can ever meet on any subject matter, we're unstoppable. And hemp is a perfect example that was bipartisan, that made it all come together. And I think it's important to know that these things aren't just cut and dry. They're not finished yet. So we're trying to get Farm Aid it might be too late to get them to do it this year. I hope not. But if it is, then we're going to wrap the film up at the next Farm Aid. I feel confident we can get them to do it next year, not this year, because it's the biggest. Well, let's see, Thomas Jefferson says the greatest service rendered any country is to introduce a new plant, a new crop to their culture. Well, this is an old crop that's being reintroduced, and it's the only crop that could bring in literally billions of dollars for those that are involved in it. Popular Science put out a magazine in the 1930s, and the article, it was on the cover, was hemp, the billion-dollar crop. Now in the 30s, to call something a billion-dollar crop was pretty amazing.
And it wasn't long after that it was taxed. Right.
And if you go through the breakdowns in that article, they could release that article today, and it's the same. They're making the same points. How many uses it had. But
it's good for the soil, right?
Yeah, it aerates the soil because it has a taproot. It when it's grown like the fiber crop where they're touching each other, it kills all the weeds and all the there's the different types of worms and things that infect the soil, and nematodes or something like that. Anyway, nematodes. It just closes out the light, so everything. It's a perfect rotation crop because of that fact. And it never stops. There's a guy, one of my first camera guys would always get on camera and go, "Is it just me, or is everybody talking about hemp?" The reason why is because everywhere we go, and this guy always wore polyester. He was a funny man. But that was Josh Hickman, the great Josh Hickman. He's doing his own thing now in LA. But anyway, the point is that there's always something new. And so they're even using it now for batteries. It has some kind of a quality to it that they're making graphite out of it. It's the most valuable crop for biochar, which they use for fuel. And it just keeps going. So I figured that was part of what we should bring out in the film. But I also wanted to make the point that the film, most people thought it was primarily about hemp. But what I felt like, and a few people caught it, said, this isn't about hemp at all. This is about activism. And that's really was my point. It was because hemp just happened to be this thing that all these different types of activists came together on. And that's what I found was my ability to show what activism does. But people think that they can't make a difference, it becomes complacent. And it's just the opposite. Julia Butterfly, by herself, she had support, but I'm saying her singular act brought attention to these old growth forests, and she stopped the company that was cutting it down, Humboldt or something. No, it was in Humboldt County where it was taking place. And her one singular act stopped a big corporation from
tell people what that one and singular act was.
Well, she climbed and lived in a 2,000-year-old redwood tree for 2 years, and she had Earth First brought food to her and things like that, so she could stay up there. But she didn't come down for 2 years. She stayed through windstorms, rainstorms. They even tried to blow her out once with a helicopter coming down real low to the trees, and they wouldn't say they were trying to blow her out, but they made it very possible that she would have fallen with that kind of proximity with the blades of the air blowing down on her. And that's what I started seeing was coming out of this. Woody being arrested, Julia in the tree, those types of activists. It should be known that you can get involved and you can make a difference, even if it's just one person.
Absolutely. That is one of the biggest messages from Sustainability Now, is that we all make a difference, and we can. We really, truly can. And that's a perfect segue into H2, Keys to the Cage, and your activism around hydrogen. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit and what the vision is for that film.
Okay. I say hydrogen's the new hemp, because in terms of the experience that I had with the hemp at the time, nobody knew about the uses and nobody knew very much about it all. Now everybody, anywhere you go, seems to know a little bit about hemp and what it can do for you. Back then, I would say to people, what do you know about hemp? and most people didn't have an answer. Now everybody does. So the same thing goes for jury nullification, by the way. But if you ask people if they know about hydrogen, they don't. Most people think hydrogen. They'll go, well, I want to buy an electric car, not a hydrogen car. That tells me they're thinking internal combustion, which, by the way, they just came out with an internal combustion hydrogen car. That's fantastic. That's another story. But the point is that all the hydrogen cars that are coming out now are electric cars. They're hydrogen electric cars, and the hydrogen just creates the electricity through the membrane, which is called a fuel cell. People think that a fuel cell is like a container of fuel, a cell that holds the fuel, but it's a singular plate that they run the hydrogen through it. It creates electrical current. So hydrogen cars are electric, and it's not appropriate to say that I'm going to get an electric car, not a hydrogen car. It's just a matter of comparing the two, and that always draws me in. I find something that nobody knows about that needs to be known, and so I started checking into it, and I started meeting these amazing people. Mike Stritsky, who you've had on your show before, and Angelo. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but Angelo is a guy out there who's just put together a car called the Hyperion, and this car looks like something out of the future for sure, and it can get 1,000 miles before refill, so that's unheard of. But it was kind of a gamble, because when I started getting involved with the hydrogen thing, it looked like it might not be the one. There's so many alternatives and so many different angles people are trying. By the way, the petroleum industry is also trying to make their fuel so pure that they can say, well, we don't have to replace any infrastructure here. We've got it. And so there's a competition going on as to what's next. And hydrogen seems to be, I call it the dark horse. It seems to be coming around the track, and all of a sudden it's in the news. And it's, you have to ask yourself, why did NASA choose hydrogen? They probably for the same reasons that people are beginning to realize it's great. So I just thought that when I heard the term, Mike Stritsky said once, we have the keys to the cage, but we just don't use them. I thought that's a great title, because it kind of says it all. And he's someone who, for whatever reasons it inspired him, the fact remains he lives in a house in Hopewell, New Jersey, where it gets really cold, and he uses solar like everybody uses solar, and the solar and the wind charge batteries. Once the batteries are full, most setups just keep going and the electricity goes to nowhere until the batteries get low again. But he takes his, fills up the batteries to full charge, and then siphons the electrical current off to these things called electrolyzers that you run electrical current through water, and it cracks the molecule. You get hydrogen and hospital grade oxygen. I did it in high school. It's a piece of cake. So he's got that at his home. He makes his own fuel. He runs his whole house off of the electricity that he generates from his storage.
In fact, the interview that we did was a tour of his skunk works, his whole mad scientist setup there. So definitely check it out. Check out the video version on sustainabilitynow.global. It's really amazing. Yeah,
he's been doing it a long time. And we just recently had, last February, we had a lot of people that died here in Texas from the freezing weather that hit. The only time it was colder than that was in 1899. It was 8 below, but it got 2 below zero here. And nothing here in Texas is geared up to handle that kind of cold, not for long. And the grid started to shut down. They had to start doing these rolling blackouts where they were turning off different generators and then they bring them back online again. And for a while they didn't report it, but now they've got the whole story. If you look at it they'll show you what happened. And the energy dropped. They were 4 minutes away from an entire meltdown of the Texas state grid, Texas having its own grid, and 4 minutes, and it would have been no electricity in Texas for up to 3 months, 3 to 6 months. That's what it would have taken to read and stuff.
That was a massive crisis averted.
Yeah, massive. And in the interim, during the freeze, 111 people died from hypothermia. Now, this is 2021, and they couldn't get the electricity to these people. And there he is. He just froze to death. These people, got some angry people out here right now.
Talk about the consortium of people that you're getting together and what this action is that you guys are going to take.
Well, that's the good news, is that I pitched all this to people at Encore, which they generate the electricity 5 or 6 years ago. And Bill Muston, who works down there, head of research and development, great guy, and he's got people to answer to, and they came up with an answer, and they said, no, we're not going to do hydrogen. We're going to go with batteries, strictly batteries. And when you need more storage, we'll just get bigger batteries. Well, I was like, how did the batteries work out for you, Bill? Because it was, I can't even put into words what the vibe is here.
Weather cripples batteries, right?
Yeah, and even the types of distribute, like with a hydrogen generator, there's no moving parts. It's just electricity comes by the process of pushing the hydrogen through the membrane. And it's you hear the cars talked about, and there's a lot. It's like a chess game. Well, my electrical car gets this much efficiency. My hydrogen electric does this, but when it comes to storage, there's no comparison to what you can do storage wise better than hydrogen. You can make it on site for starters. So when people have generators and the electricity goes off, when they run out of gasoline or however they're running their generator, diesel, they're done. But if you have an electrolyzer, an in-house system with solar, you could stay out there and sustain yourself forever. You don't get to watch all the favorite TV shows. You try to keep your energy use down during that time period. But when the Hurricane Sandy hit the eastern seaboard and shut everything down, Mike's house was the only thing that was on. People coming up to get a warm cup of coffee. So that's the major difference, is that it can be made on site. Anybody can make it.
So the thing about battery power or electricity through batteries is that for the more your electrical needs are, the bigger the batteries need to be, right?
For storage, yeah.
And there's a lot of weight, and there's all kinds
of they will slowly drain over time. Hydrogen, if you keep it in an airtight tank, will last for 1,000 years. You can come back and it's still the same amount of energy in there. There's no comparison. And then people think, well, the Hindenburg and all that. Well, when the hydrogen explodes, it just goes, pop, that's it. It doesn't, all that burning was the shell of the thing, and the type of paint that they used on it caught on fire. So the Hindenburg was a big dramatic thing.
Yeah.
But there's another element to it that I'm trying to get the powers that be in Texas to understand is certain countries that depend on oil, they don't have any, like Japan. Now that hydrogen has become a candidate, they're going that way no matter what. They don't care if it costs more than gasoline. Everybody wants freedom and independence and don't want to be under the thumb of another country. And once this catches on, a lot of people don't think about this or mention it, but it's going to level the playing field in the geopolitics of the world, because you aren't under anybody's thumb if you can make your own power. And so it's going to catch on just for that reason alone. And that's why I tell, oil and gas people in Texas, and I've converted a few, to say, look, right now you only serve one thing. Why not be a buffet and get a piece of the action everywhere? And they have a lot of hydrogen here, more than any other state, and they're starting to get it, But back to the freeze, that created the motion that now I think they're really receptive to this now, not like in the past. They need to do something immediately.
Yes.
That's where we have our upper hand now. So
you have a whole coalition of folks that are going to be speaking with the legislators.
Yeah, we have Phil. How do you pronounce Phil's last name?
Herder.
Phil Herder. Yeah, I just call him Phil, but Phil Herder runs Infinity Fuel and Hydrogen. That company is going to be kind of like our spearhead for getting this implemented. We've got Sean Clark. He goes 5 degrees and taught at Harvard. He's one of our main engineers. I even recruited Mike Stritsky the other day. He's going to come when the time is right. He's going to be here as one of our point men to bring this to the Congress in Texas, the Texas state government. And they passed the bill yesterday that is allocating the funds to do it now. So we got a lot of money available to make it happen. And
it's not advocating it specifically for hydrogen, though, right?
No, it's got research and development. But we've got the dark horse. I mean, nothing comes close to storage, fuel and energy storage than hydrogen.
Yes, and that's really the whole point.
And people are worried about explosions. All that's ancient history. They put this kind of metal dust inside the tanks now. It's called a metal hydride. You can shoot a bullet through a tank, and you might get a flick of a lighter, like a big lighter coming out of it. But
and the truth is, it's a lot safer. It's a lot safer than fossil fuels.
Yeah, and it doesn't hover like natural gas. It hovers on the ground. Hydrogen goes straight up 45 miles an hour to the upper atmosphere. where it lives. There's just no comparison. It just, those tanks don't explode. You have to have oxygen in the tanks to create the explosion.
So on that note, Michael, I just want to say, I want to ask, is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask?
What can people do?
I love it.
What I even asked Ralph Nader, I said, what would happen if we all chose one thing? And he said, well, that'd be quite amazing. That would be a consensus, I think. He said that would pass everything up. What would that be? And I said, microgrids. Could you imagine living in any area in the country and you're up against a district border and they have a microgrid and you don't, and you know that if the electricity goes out, they stay on and you don't? I would rather have that than the roads fixed or the schools. First, let's get the microgrids in place. It's for national safety, because the EMP attacks couldn't affect us anymore. And you make money off of it because it feeds back into the grid. You still keep your grid. It's the solution that everybody, it's like Ralph Nader says, if you can get right and the left to meet, it's unstoppable. But if the right and the left just knew that an installation of a microgrid in your district would be such a safety factor that you wouldn't even have to worry about the grid going down. It would be their problem, not yours. Everybody would do it.
Maybe that's the topic for your next film too.
Microgrids, yeah, they're the wave of the future.
There you go.
You
So
get them down,
Michael,
all the way down to your home,
how can people reach you?
Hempstersthemovie.com.
Okay.
And my email address, I don't have a problem with that. Michael@sovereignfilms.com. That's Michael, Michael, @sovereignfilms.com. SOVRANFILMS.com.
Beautiful.
The abbreviated spelling of sovereignty.
It has been such a privilege and a pleasure. As always, I'm so glad to have had this time with you. And I want to say thank you to everyone in our audience, all the visionaries, all the folks that realize that you do make a difference. And with all of our voices, we can be heard. And I want to say thank you to our producer and my co-founder, Scott Billy. And please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And until next time, live your best life, love the world around you, and together we can save the world.
Thank you for listening to Sustainability Now, solutions to shape a world that works. Visit sustainabilitynow.global for resources related to today's program. And be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us on social media.